I tend to see any ecosystem as a kind of a toolbox. And so if you spend enough time in the toolbox, you're like, I could assemble these few tools and make something new. And I think that's exactly what happened. Yeah. So I had spent quite a while in the space sector. I think it's an Indian saying that the founder of Patagonia uses. He says, we are the people we are waiting for, which is really true for nuclear as well. Why
Yeah.
aren't we doing more nuclear? Well, we are the people we are waiting for. Let's do it. It's up to us to do it.
Just because the facts are A, if the narrative is B and everyone believes the narrative, then B is what matters. But it's our job in our industry to speak up proudly, soberly, and to engage people in this dialogue. Those 2.5 billion people that are in energy poverty, they need us.
America cannot meet this threat alone.
If there is a single country,
Of course, the world cannot meet it without America.
that is willing
But
to
we're going to need you, the next generation, to finish the
overhaul
job.
nuclear regulation
We need scientists to design new
and
fuels.
focus on net public
We need
benefit
engineers to invent new technologies. We need
over absurd levels of radiation protection,
entrepreneurs to sell those
then
technologies.
we will march towards this.
We need workers to operate assembly lines that hum with high-tech, zero-carbon
We have
components.
unlimited prosperity for all humans.
We need diplomats and businessmen and women and Peace Corps volunteers to help developing nations skip past the dirty phase of development and transition to sustainable sources of energy. In other words, we need you.
All right. Welcome to another episode of the Fire Division podcast. We're joined today by Guerric de Crombrugghe.
Almost.
That's the
I'm not
best.
gonna correct you. It's almost good.
He's a founding partner at Nuketech, which I'm really excited to learn about Nuketech and hear about all the work that you guys are doing. So, Guerric, for the audience, why don't you give kind of a 30-second self-introduction, and we'll dive into some of your background and talk about how you got here.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much, Mark, for hosting me. I'm very excited to be able to have this conversation. So indeed, Guerric de Crombrugghe, that's my name. So I'm an engineer by training, a master in fluid dynamics and another master in electromechanical engineering. And I got a PhD in plasma physics from the University of Queensland. I worked for 10 years approximately, give or take, in the aerospace sector, everything that flies, drones, rockets, airplanes, etc. And then launched a startup, sold the startup, and decided to go on with my next challenge, which would be the nuclear sector. And so now we are actually fundraising. So we are structuring at the moment one of the first nuclear-focused venture capital funds for early-stage startups developing solutions relevant for the nuclear sector with two other associates, Nuketech. Voilà.
Yeah, that's incredible. I can't wait to hear more about it. So you started in the startup world, though. What kind of projects were you guys working on? You said aerospace, right?
Yeah. So aerospace, I first did everything you can do as a job in the aerospace sector, as a type of job, I mean, starting with academia, research, and then strategy consulting. And after strategy consulting, I moved on to being actually more operational in the industry for a couple of different companies. And there really, it was very diversified, super interesting. So working on the maintenance of fighter jets all the way to thrust vector control systems for rocket launchers. So very exciting topics. And then I launched my startup. I've always had a very strong interest for innovation and so on, but I launched my startup a little bit late. I had plenty of ideas in the meantime, so that was a lot of failed project, but the first one that actually worked.
You had a lot of activity on your LinkedIn, right?
Yeah, true. And so the startup, we were delivering analytics for agriculture based on satellite imagery using a specific technology called hyperspectral. And so we sold it last year in April. And now we sold it to another startup. And now the consolidated entity has a payload on the International Space Station, launching 2 satellites next year. Just had a big demo with Bayer in Chicago, etc. So yeah, it's going well. Yeah.
Awesome. Was it just exposure to the space that allowed you to try with that startup?
Yeah. So I think the more if you like to tinker and have ideas and look at, okay, what could do, I tend to see any ecosystem as a kind of a toolbox. And so if you spend enough time in the toolbox, you're like, I could assemble these few tools and make something new. And I think that's exactly what happened. Yeah. So I had spent quite a while in the space sector. I knew a lot of people, had a really good network, which also helps to get the funding, etc. And yeah, at some point I was like, okay, satellite imagery is really relevant for agriculture, but we need that extra edge, which is hyperspectral technologies. No one is doing it. Why? And then I was like, because they're waiting for me, actually. So I'm going to do it.
Strong sense of ownership. And
yeah. I think it's an Indian saying that the founder of Patagonia uses. He says, we are the people we are waiting for, which is really true for nuclear as well. Why aren't we doing more nuclear? Well, we are the people we are waiting for. Let's do it. It's up to us to do it.
Totally agree. Okay, so what is Nuketech? How did you get interested in nuclear, and what are you guys trying to accomplish?
So I got interested in nuclear. I got interested in nuclear because I was looking at the issues of climate change, etc. And if you get into the first principle thinking, climate change, greenhouse gases, where do they come from? 75% comes from energy production. More renewables. Already a lot of people working on it. Cool. Let them continue, but is there something else we could do? Well, nuclear. We stopped doing nuclear. It's super low carbon, so we need nuclear. It's honestly, it's a bit of a no-brainer. So yeah, okay, let's go for it. And then digging into the nuclear sector, what I saw is I tend to be very talkative. So if you need to stop me, stop me. But what I noticed by looking at the nuclear sector was something very similar to the space sector a decade ago, right? So it used to be big companies with cost-plus contract from directly emerging from states, etc. And everything is long and expensive. And that's just the way it is. And you cannot really put everything in question. And then gradually in the space sector, you had people saying, instead of having these big geostationary satellites, why don't we have small modular satellites? And then you had a couple of billionaires coming, like Elon Musk, of course, with SpaceX saying, I'm going to make a brand new rocket and reuse it, etc. And everybody thought he was crazy, but look at now. That trend has created a whole new sector. It hasn't replaced the previous sector. It has come on top of it. So it's a whole new flourishing market. And then when I got interested in the nuclear sector, I saw exactly the same, replacing big power plant by small modular reactors, like we have small modular satellites. And then Bill Gates saying, I like nuclear. I'm going to put a lot of money on a new design for our reactors. Right. So it's exactly the same, actually. And the more time goes by, the more I realize that, this early intuition is really confirmed that, okay, there is something happening in the nuclear sector. A lot of innovation is pouring into the nuclear sector. And so I thought, okay, original intention is to save the planet, but then at the same time, I know that a lot of people made a lot of money betting on these early space startups. So why don't I make money while saving the planet? And let's launch a VC fund to facilitate the emergence of all these new startups coming into the nuclear sector.
That's awesome.
I'm not that motivated by money deep down. I'm really more a technical nerd, but I need to talk about that too. Otherwise, I'm not credible in venture capital.
Right. You got to make money along the way, but it helps you listen or focus on kind of the more technical side too.
Yeah.
So
cool. Perfect.
So you've got an accent, Guerric. Where are you from? It's certainly not an American accent.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. No, I got a really strong accent. I'm very self-aware. So Belgium. So it would be a French accent, French-speaking Belgium. So I did my PhD thesis in Australia at the University of Queensland. I never picked up the Aussie accent. So I guess I'm with that accent forever. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll talk a little bit more about Belgium, but let's focus on Nuketech for now. So nuclear's hard, or it has been in the past. Was that daunting for you when you were thinking about VC fund? Like, how'd you get around that idea?
You mean, how did you make the connection between the nuclear sector and creating a VC fund?
Asking a different way, the conventional wisdom was don't invest in hardware. It's difficult, challenging, and then don't invest in industries that are heavily regulated. There's long lead times. It's harder to get your hurdle rates. Like, why would you be interested or try and start this?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. Thanks. Well, first of all, if it was easy, everybody would do it. So
opportunity. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's one. Second, maybe something else that comes on top of it is, I come from the startup we launched was about launching satellites in space, etc. So it was also deep tech focused. But maybe a third element is, and I didn't mention that but within venture capital, we go for the innovations we look at are very VC friendly. So we've divided our investment focus in 4 different segments. And the 3 first segments are really akin to what you might call Industry 4.0. And therein, we focus on enabling technologies. So we look at digitalization, so anything related to AI, cybersecurity, digital twins, etc. The second focus is robotics, automation, computer vision, sensors, etc. And the third segment is hardware. And hardware is civil engineering, construction in the largest sense, right? And why did this 3? Well, because everything is analog on a nuclear power plant, so you need to digitize. There are a lot of opportunities to digitize. Second, because there have been so many progresses in robotics and automation. Now it's time to bring that in the nuclear sector as well. There is already a lot of it, right? But we can do so much more. And the third one is because, the cost of nuclear energy is driven by the overnight cost of construction. So if you can reduce the construction cost or the civil engineering cost in general, well, you improve everything. And these 3 first segments are really VC friendly. And the innovations we see therein are relevant for the nuclear industry, but for other industries as well. So quite often we have startups that have developed something for the maritime sector, and they come to us and they say, okay, it's also relevant for the nuclear sector. We'd like to get into that. So that is okay. And then because we get a lot of exposure as one of the only VC funds in nuclear energy, and also the name, so we coined the name Nuketech. Like we have space tech, fintech, climate tech. Well, Nuketech, it's us. That's it. So thank you. So we get a fair level of exposure, and that means that anyone developing something that is pure play nuclear will at some point type in Google venture capital nuclear, and they will come across us because that's just the way it is. And so we get to see all of these projects as well, and that means that we can really put a high pass filter and only keep the best of the best, the most interesting ones. And so we will also focus on. We will also invest in a couple of pure play nuclear startups that are really, really added value with a fantastic team, etc. And that includes small modular reactors, of course, advanced reactors for sure, but also we see solutions for waste management. We see a lot of people working on the fuel cycle as well. And to me, that is very interesting. Of course, in the media and so on, there is a lot of attention on, first of all, fusion, and secondly, small modular reactors. Okay, cool, fair enough. But there is so much more on the fuel cycle. There's so much to do, so much innovation you can bring. So, voilà. That's the answer.
That's awesome. Existing plants and displacing existing technologies with new technologies, but then both from the instruments level and the digital application in existing facilities, and then building new facilities.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I fear a little bit sometimes. I'm not the only one to say this, of course. Your listener probably heard that already 10 or 20 times, but that's what I fear a little bit with small modular reactors and this type of innovation, is that sometimes it can be an excuse to say we will act later. Oh yes, nuclear is cool, but we will focus on small modular reactors, which are way back down the line in case.
When there's a whole industry that already exists and we need to service it. And
Exactly. And then there is also the marketing argument, my molten salt reactor is safer. Like, no, but what exists today is safe. When, for example, my mom hears that, I like to take my mom as an example of the general public, but if you go to my mom and you tell her this new reactor is safer, immediately she thinks, the existing ones are not safe.
Right.
No, they are safe. Voilà. Sorry, I'm still there. It's just my dog that wants to go out, but I'm still there.
All good. Yeah. I actually think you might be using the mic on your computer instead of headphones. So when you step away, at least it gets quieter. So.
Okay. Let me see if I can arrange
No
that.
worries. I don't know if
I don't know. I cannot change while recording. Okay, sorry.
Don't worry. Yeah, no worries about it. So what's the size of the fund? If you can, yeah.
No, yeah. So we are aiming for a 50 million euros fund. And as I said, we are in the fundraising process at the moment.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah. Is there specific size of companies that you guys are looking at? I mean, timeline to deployment, like what's...
Yeah, so you mean for us, the timeline of deployment for our funds?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the ideal candidate to partner with you? I mean, it's a small startup,
Yeah.
group of 10 people, 2 people, 100 people, like.
Yeah. So for the VC friendly cases, so the three first segments I mentioned,
Mhm.
everything early stage. That's for
Yeah.
sure. So the tickets we intend to put are maximum up to 2.5 million, including the follow up. So that would be early stage. And so for the industry 4.0 cases, what we would be after is really basically a team of a couple of people that have developed a nice solution. There is already a technical demo or something, and ideally some commercial traction as well that is in the form of some early customers. So ideally post revenue. And it's quite often the case. So more often than not, we see that, okay, startups have already a fair amount of revenue, etc. They just need more money to grow. For the pure play case, so these are much more ambitious, of course. You need a lot of cash to deploy a reactor, etc. And so for these cases, what we would look at is, of course, the team, but also the partnerships that have established. I don't know if you're developing a new type of fuel. Okay, have you already started discussing with the existing fuel manufacturers? What kind of LOI have you signed, etc. And commercial traction as well. But then again, in the form of LOIs or a big utility that said, okay, I'm interested in what they do and I'd like to purchase it when it's available. Just to make sure that it's not just a tech push of a few engineers in a garage. This is cool. Let's do this. Which is
People are gonna love it. It's gonna be the coolest stuff ever. And then there's
yeah.
I've seen
Exactly.
that a lot.
Yeah. Exactly.
Are there any companies that you're excited about, or can you share if you've invested in a couple companies? Or yeah.
So there are many companies we are excited about. I don't want to. So right now we receive approximately 4 to 5 startups a week, all
This is
active in the
this is
nuclear.
good deal
Yeah,
flow. Yeah.
much better than I imagined because these 4 to 5 are actually active in the nuclear sector and
Yeah.
qualify as startups. Sometimes we have startups that are way too big for us that come to us. The big names, I'm not gonna cite any, but the usual suspects
You can
when
Google it,
when
right?
they
Yeah.
fundraise. Yeah. When they fundraise, they more often than not they actually came to us and asked us to invest, and then we tell them no, the funding round now is way too big. We are more on the early stage, not on the growth stage. And then they say, yeah, but if you put even 500,000, it can convince the bigger private equity players, etc., that what we're doing makes sense because this fund that knows about the market, technology, and regulatory framework of nuclear, this fund believes in us. So
Right.
that's for us, it's really a big success. We will not do it anyway because that's not what we do. But it's always nice to hear. So yeah, so we see a lot of things. And there is currently a lot to be excited about. That I can tell you. There is a lot to be excited about. Lots of
Absolutely.
cool innovation. Yeah.
Okay, so Belgium specifically, when I've looked at it before, nuclear seems to be somewhat of a dirty word. I mean, is that true? Is my
Yeah.
interpretation true? Give us some color on that.
Well, it depends a little bit who you ask, of course. But it's true that Belgium is, I hope no one that matters on the political level is going to listen. But okay. Belgium tends to be, because we are really small, we tend to just look at what the big guys are doing. So we follow either France or Germany.
Yeah.
And in this case, we follow Germany. Voilà. I would say that's really the bottom line of it, which is a bit sad because historically Belgium is a really important player in the nuclear sector. And basically, it all stems from the fact that we had uranium mines at the beginning of the previous century in Katanga.
Okay.
And that uranium was important for the United States and the UK for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
It was actually one of the only supplies, I think, if I'm not mistaken, back then, because it was back when uranium was seen as a waste, basically. It's a byproduct that you can use to put in uranium glass to make it a little bit green. It's colorful, it's nice, but it didn't have much use. And so all of a sudden, it was of strategic importance for the United States and then for the UK as well. And so they signed an agreement all together saying, okay, all of the Belgian uranium is for us. And in exchange, at some point, if there are civilian applications of nuclear technologies, we will give you something in return. We don't know what yet. It was very ill-defined, but we'll see. You will receive something in return. And then it actually happened. The United States helped set up a major research center we have in Belgium called the SCKCN. It's basically the Center for Research in Nuclear Energy. So it's 1,000 people, so it's quite sizable, in which we had 3 nuclear reactors. Now we only have 2 left. One of them is for material testing. The other one is for radioisotope production. The third one that has been dismantled was actually the first PWR in Western Europe. And it was also the first one to be fully dismantled. So it served as kind of the baseline at the European level on how to dismantle our reactor.
Why did they decommission it or dismantle it?
I think so. The intention was to first build that one, and then based on that one, I think they built the nuclear power plants in Chaux between France and Belgium, and then they built the 7 nuclear reactors we have, not all still operational, but it was never meant to be in there for the long run. And actually, so that was seen as an opportunity. Okay, let's make sure we have a full understanding of the entire life cycle. And now that we built it, we operated it, let's dismantle it so that we are sure we know how to dismantle these reactors. But so now on the same site, you also have a test site for deep geological repositories, etc. So it's a fantastic research center. So we really capitalized on that, and we mattered. Belgium mattered in the international nuclear scene. And then gradually we lost interest in nuclear. But yeah, hopefully it's coming back.
Yeah, absolutely. Why does this dichotomy exist between France and Germany? Maybe that's a deeper question.
Yeah, that's a very complicated question.
But like France, like, nope, we're going full in, all in. This is a great idea. And Germany's like, nope, we're bowing out. We're going to burn more coal.
No, yeah. I can imagine that looking at it from the United States, it may seem very strange what's going on.
Kind of, but it's also like we've got California and Texas. And
yeah, true. No, you're right.
Same country, right?
That's correct. Yeah. So now, I don't know if you know this, but we have basically at the EU level, there is a nuclear alliance with 12, 13 countries that are pro-nuclear and that really want to have nuclear in the green taxonomy.
Sweden.
Nuclear from hydrogen. Yeah, exactly. But also a lot of Eastern countries, which is actually good news. Like Poland, the fact that, the fact that Poland is, it's good that France is keen on nuclear, but it's even better that Poland is keen on nuclear because they are a heavy greenhouse gases emission player.
Yeah.
So you have this pro-nuclear group, and then you have the anti-nuclear group, which is pro-renewables. But it's like, we shouldn't have branded ourselves as a pro-nuclear because we are also pro-renewables. So big dichotomy. For example, Belgium is in both. See? We are in the pro group and the against group because why not?
Yeah, and for Belgium, is that a stereotype? Or?
Yeah. We say that we are the land of surrealism. So yeah, we always do this type of stuff where like it doesn't make any sense, but does it matter? Not really. So it's okay. But so the dichotomy between France and Germany, it's hard to say because Germany was keen on nuclear at some point. It's true that they have had a couple of scandals on waste management back in the 70s or 80s. I don't remember exactly. So maybe that has created a kind of a lack of appetite for nuclear. And on the other hand, I mean, let's not forget that France has the atomic weapons. France has nuclear submarines. So there is a strategic interest for France that goes way beyond power generation.
Yeah. It is so strange to me that a country would be willing to cut down trees and use biomass for energy instead of using rocks, right? Like, man, we're going to just cut down forests and like, it's very strange.
Fully agree, especially in Europe.
Yeah.
We organized an event with Mark Nelson, who you must know, most likely. So he came when we closed the nuclear reactor in Doul in Tihange. There was a big protest, so he came to show support, etc. And so we organized a fireside chat with him. It was really refreshing because we had all these. So Nuketech, we organized a small event with industry players and a couple of politicians and so on. And we tend to be very restrained when we talk about nuclear still. And then Mark was there, who, as you must know, is very talkative and loud.
Get out of my way. I'm here to talk about.
Exactly. But he said a couple of things that are really true. And the first thing he said is, okay, being the fact that the United States is not doing nuclear is sad, but it doesn't matter too much because we have plenty of resources. The fact that Europe is not doing nuclear is an existential threat because you don't have any resource. It's your only way to have sovereignty over energy production.
You guys could
And
frack, but
it's true. We could frack, maybe. But I mean, at the end of the day, yeah, it was true. It's and that was a wake-up call for a lot of people. And then we talk about how the US now is very active in Eastern Europe, Westinghouse sells reactors to Poland, etc. And it was like, yeah, that's just the way it's going to be. You keep debating whether or not you're pro-nuclear. Keep that debate alive. That's a very good idea. And in the meanwhile, we take all of your good engineers to the United States to design plans that we will sell you back in a couple of years when you don't have a choice.
When you realize this is a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. There's some companies like Last Energy comes to mind where they don't trust the US to do anything, and so they've already gone to Europe and they want to build more there. I mean,
yeah.
Do you think it'll happen faster in Europe? I mean, is this a better venue to try and build more nuclear?
I don't know the situation in the United States well enough, but it's true that, I think Eastern Europe in particular is a very fertile ground for decarbonation. And so I can imagine, of course, there are so many opportunities there to go and build. France is going to be complicated because there is EDF. But for the rest, no, I think we will be building a lot in Europe as well, as in the rest of the world.
So what's your perspective, Guerric, over the past, call it 10 years? What's the energy industry been like in Europe? I mean, you alluded to Mark Nelson's comments about not having a lot of resources and prices have spiked a bunch. Yeah.
Well, it's a good question. I'm not really in my comfort zone if we go on the macro energy questions.
Sure.
What I can say, though, is I think we tried the big renewable experiments.
Yeah.
And we see that it doesn't really work. The full renewable experiment, it doesn't really work. And it brings us to situations where, for example, now, so we have the beautiful North Sea. Fine, it's not beautiful, but it's full of nature. So that's the sea between the UK and Belgium, etc. And now actually, our Minister of Energy, who is from the Green Party, is congratulating herself because they are going to transform the North Sea in the biggest energy producing infrastructure in the world. I don't remember the exact word, but this obsession with renewables come to a point where we are actually congratulating ourselves for our making artificial a very vast area of nature just to make power. And that shows a little bit, I think, the limit of the system, especially coming from the Green Party. Yeah, so I think now we are slowly realizing that the renewables are good. Of course, we shouldn't stop building renewable. They are essential. Also need nuclear for sure.
Gotcha. Okay, so you guys are focused on nuclear in just Europe right now? Or
No.
No? Okay.
So
starting in Europe, but you look at the rest of the world too. Yeah.
Yeah. You're right that on the website we mostly advertise Europe. Actually,
maybe we should change that.
Yeah, we should update that as well. That's right. So I said that we have 4 to 5 startups a week. I would say that 1/3 of our deal flow is France, because France is this big atomic nation, and also
there's a lot of talent there. People are already exposed to it. They already have experience.
Exactly. And then Macron wanted to make it the startup nation as well. So there is also this intention to go ahead and create startups, etc. So 1/3 comes from France. 1/3, I would say, come from the Anglo-Saxon world at large. So UK, Canada, and the United States. And then 1/3 from Europe. But so we do have more deal flow than we expected from the United States. And I think we will try to expand that a little bit, because there is a lot happening in the United States as well, which is really interesting.
Yeah. I'm curious about the contrast between like startups or people that approach you. I'm kind of just curious about the people piece. Like, how are the French different from the UK, different from the Americans?
Mm-hmm. It's a really good question. Most French would be French, Belgian. In continental Europe, I think we are much more humble. So we take a more restrained perspective. Yes, I'm here to build a business, and it's very safe. Don't worry. In the United States, it's the complete opposite, of course. It's, yeah, okay, moonshot, let's dream. It's going to be fantastic. Let's do it. So, okay, I'm forcing a little bit, but to a large extent, it's really like that. And actually, most of the moonshot startups we see are really in the United States. And for example, small modular reactor developers, quite often in the United States or even in Canada, they will be built in the traditional startup fashion. So it's really a team, and for example, the main shareholders are the founders, and they build it like that. On continental Europe, immediately you will see. So we start, but all of these companies have taken already 80% of the shares because they help us. So there is less this. So the yeah, I think the
There's
deep
more
tech
equity
startup
available
attitude.
from American
Yeah,
companies, but there's
yeah. And but then sometimes you have a startup in France or in continental Europe that wants to play like the American, but then they overdo it. They don't manage, to find the right balance, and they tell you, yeah, we are going to build 10,000 nuclear power plants, and they are going to be cheaper than coal, and this and that. You're like, no, that's too much. Don't. It's good to oversell a little bit, but not that much. That's too much.
that's
And the UK would be in between, really, as you would expect. Yeah,
okay. Yeah.
that's my
Canadian.
experience. Huh? Yeah.
Okay. I love it. I mean, as an American, that's kind of loud, boisterous, and yeah, I feel like I fit that stereotype. So,
But
Never have I felt-
to a certain extent, it's I don't know which approach is the best, but another dimension that is really interesting though is the I think in continental Europe we are more thinkers, and in the United States you are more doers, which is everybody knows that, but you also see that with the startup approach. So a startup in France presenting a project will show you all the simulations they did and the calculations and the computation, etc., etc. While in the US, they will show you, yeah, we built this in our garage and it's fantastic. And
yeah,
honestly, for that, I think we in Europe, we need to learn to bend some steel, get out there, get in the shed and actually make stuff. Yeah.
yeah. That's exciting. That's a fun perspective. Is venture capital different, meaning like from the finance side? I mean, kind of the 2 and 20 model is classic in the US, but is there, I don't know, different hurdle rates or different, I don't know, metrics that,
From the United States and Europe, I don't think so. And I wouldn't be too sure, but we want to be, nuclear is complex enough. So we really want to be our investment terms as plain vanilla as possible. So that's okay.
got it. Yeah.
No questions about that. Let's focus on nuclear and the added value. Yeah.
That makes sense. So if there's going to be more plants built in Europe, then where are some of the first ones going to be built?
So now we see, I don't know where the first one will be built. I would assume the Polish plants from Westinghouse. I'm not sure if they are really the first ones, but they were actually the latest to be announced with an actual contract award.
Got it.
But then, yeah, France, the UK will build more. Switzerland has plans. The Netherlands as well. Yeah. So, and the list goes on and on. But I think the next one is Poland. But I may be wrong. Maybe one of your listeners will say, no, that's not true.
Sure. I'm curious. When I've heard about and when I've seen power plants in the US at least, there's been a slow adoption of technology, kind of modern technology, instrumentation, measurements, SCADA systems. It's just been slow to come to nuclear. Is that the same case for Europe? And I guess, is that an opportunity?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But that's actually, it's true that I didn't touch upon that, but that's actually our investment thesis.
Yeah.
So I told you one of the stories on how we build Nuketech, but actually another story and another way to look at it is there hasn't been much innovation in the nuclear energy sector at large since, you could argue, since Chernobyl, maybe, but since Fukushima, definitely nothing has happened. Nothing has changed, right? Not much. And
All the rest of the world's just innovating every day.
yeah, exactly. I mean, but the rest of the world, but also some critical industries, the aerospace sector, the pharma sector, etc. They've kept on innovating and developing tools and enabling tech to be more efficient, etc. Even in very high stake, high risk industries, they kept on innovating. And Okay, so that's the status quo. And now we come at a point where all of a sudden we need to build a tremendous lot really fast. There is the order book to build new power plants is huge. In France, for example, that's a nice illustration. They already said if we are to do what the government asks us to do, so that's what the industry said, we need to hire 10,000 to 15,000 additional workers in the nuclear sector per year. So they are missing 100,000 people. It's huge.
Yeah.
So the bottleneck is not, the bottleneck used to be the politicians, but now the bottleneck is the industry. All of a sudden is, you want to build, so much, wow. I'm sorry, I can't do it. I simply don't have the resources to do it. And that's where we come in the picture, because the good news is, okay, they cannot do it, but the good news is there are so many low-hanging fruits that we can now bring into the nuclear sector, coming from other sectors like aerospace, like pharma, and the rest, that we can bring now in the nuclear sector to make things more efficient, to build faster, better, more, etc. That's the idea. So you're right, not that much innovation in nuclear power plants, which is good news. Honestly, it's good news not only for us, but in general, because the margin for improvement is huge. And there is actually a lot of traction from the nuclear sector itself as well to go ahead and build more and use these innovations. The thing is, they are so busy with new build, long-term operations, etc., etc. They don't have the time to innovate. So they're really happy to see stakeholders like us making sure, don't worry, we'll make sure that innovation is coming, and when it's mature, you buy it.
Gotcha. Would you say that's the most impactful step that we could take, is kind of capital investment in this space, or is there something else that could move the needle further?
Well, I think it's definitely
it's a piece of it.
So the capital investment part is really important. So it's really important to keep on doing it and bringing the spirit of innovation in the nuclear sector and showing that we can actually do more and better, etc. Yeah, so that is definitely a very important part. And we are very happy to see newcomers coming in that space as well. And so that's one part. A second part, I would say, is in terms of communication. And again, that's not new, but I think, especially in Europe, we are really restrained when it comes to nuclear. And it's time to embrace the fact that nuclear energy is fantastic and be proud about it and actually make it cool again. Just show that it's nice. It's something we can rely upon with a very small environmental footprint. It's almost magical. You have these hot frogs, you put them in water and they make steam, and then you have electricity. It's fantastic. I mean, so there is a big effort in terms of communication, not to be always on the defensive, arguing why the shortcomings of nuclear are not really shortcomings or are not that bad, or how you mitigate them, but just talk about the positive points. And there are many examples of people that do that really well. In the United States, I like to look at all the communications of Generation Atomic, and these kind of people. In France, actually, Orano is doing a fantastic effort in terms of communication. They have Orano, fuel manufacturing.
Oh, yeah.
They have a TikTok channel, etc. They make jokes. They de-dramatize a little bit nuclear, like, okay, no need to be all serious about it. And that is going to change a lot the public acceptance. And I think that if you have the public acceptance, which drives the politic, that is really the engine. And then in innovation, and so venture capital as part of innovation, acting as a catalyst, and then we'll manage to build more.
Yeah, there's money and finance, and investors will take a lot of risks often, but there's almost nothing scarier than government and political and regulatory risk from an investor.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. Yeah, fully agree.
The chance of your industry being shut down or your assets being seized is continuous threat.
Exactly.
People get scared with that, and rightfully so, right? I hear you on like, okay, well, we need this advocacy piece, right? That's part of this podcast. Is like, okay, how do we help add a voice and a positive voice to this conversation? And
exactly. I hope that if you look at climate change, it used to be that all the media communication on climate change was a scientist from the IPCC and a climate denier. And then they debate, is it real or not? And it's very frustrating because, yes, it's real. Let's talk about how we tackle it. And now we don't have that anymore. Now it has really shifted. If we talk about climate change in the media, it's more on how do we act upon the fact that climate change is there? what can we do, what are the priorities, and we can argue on the priorities. That's much more constructive than arguing on whether it's real or not. And my feeling is that slowly we are getting there with nuclear as well. It used to be whenever there is a debate, he's pro, he's against, they fight. And it's frustrating because it's not very constructive. And now we come into a point, that's my impression. Maybe you're not fully there yet, but we are coming towards a point where we can actually, in the media, talk about how we do nuclear. What are the priorities? Is it SMRs? Is it fusion? Is it good old reactors? Is it? I have my opinion, but I prefer we debate on these questions rather than on whether we have to do nuclear.
Yeah, you're a step further in the debate than where
exactly.
we were 10 years ago.
But it's exactly what you do now with fire to fission, right? So we don't talk about whether or not we do nuclear. We talk about how to do nuclear.
Exactly.
What are the priorities? Yeah, it's perfect.
How else can people help? What are the best steps that we can take to build more?
To build what? Sorry?
To build more nuclear.
Well, so the public acceptance driving the political support as the engine, I think. So but the engine is not enough. And that's where really innovation comes on top of it as a catalyst. So what can we do? It depends a little bit on who you are, right? So there are a lot of citizen movements advocating for nuclear. So that's one. If you feel like an entrepreneur, then launch a company these are all steps we can take, definitely. But I think for the general public, the first step is really to, as always, to educate yourself on what is radioactivity, why should you be afraid of it, etc. And listen to the scientists. Because if you listen to the scientists, they say to do more nuclear. So if we have to listen to the scientists about climate change, let's do the same about energy policies.
The solution. If we listen to them about the problem, listen to them about the solution.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you want to help, then start a company and talk to Nuketech, right? Like look for investment.
Exactly. But it has happened a couple of times because small modular reactors and whatnot are shiny. So quite often we see entrepreneurs with this moonshot ambition of making a new reactor, etc. And you can see they don't really have the right maturity or partnerships, etc. And so we tell them, okay, guys, it's cool, but you can also focus on enabling techs to make it happen, etc. And so let's not be too focused on the shiny objects, and let's also look at what the nuclear sector actually needs.
Yeah. So Guerric, leave us on a positive note. What's your vision of the future? Where's the world going? What's it going to be like in 5, 10, 20 years?
That's a very good question. Actually, my vision for a positive future is shifting a little bit at the moment.
Interesting.
I used to be very into, I would not say degrowth, but sobriety and so on.
Conservation, energy efficiency.
Yeah. Which I still think is very important. So I'm not gonna change too much my stance on that. I think it's important, but this vision of a shrinking universe is slowly leaving me as I realize that actually energy abundance is important to pull people out of poverty, to have good infrastructure, an efficient healthcare system, etc. So energy abundance is important. So now that's why it's shifting. At the same time, I think there is value in having a little bit of sobriety and, for example, not taking the plane for any occasion, etc., but be more conscious about, when do I need really to travel by plane? When is it important, etc. So I think there is value into that. But at the same time, I think at the end of the day, if we wanted, we could have almost unlimited energy. So what is it really that I want? I'm not too sure. But no matter what vision actually materializes, I think we need energy abundance. That's for sure. And nuclear can bring that. So my vision for the future would be a lot of renewables, a lot of nuclear energy, as much as can be of these big old 1 gigawatt reactors. And on top of that, many SMRs, if we want. Why not? That's cool. And then we will have the necessary energy basis to actually explore solutions to climate change, etc., I think.
I love it. That's a great place to leave it. Guerric, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Cool.